Prof Uwaleke is the president of the Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. He joins me live from our Abuja studios. Prof, good evening and thank you for joining us on the news at 7.
Good evening, Tolu. It's indeed my pleasure to be here.
Well, we're talking about 68.32 trillion naira here, 4.7 trillion naira for statutory transfer, 15.8 for debt service, and 15.4 for recurrent expenditure, and 32.2 for capital expenditure, trillion naira. What do you make of all of this surrounding the spending plan for 2026?
I said the spending plan is ambitious, given the size, 68.3 trillion. But I think that if you look at the economy, the Nigerian economy, that's still a far cry from what is required. 68.3 trillion is roughly $50 billion. And only recently we heard that to narrow the infrastructure gap you have in this country, you need as much as over $2 trillion, to be able to do that. So 68.3 for a country like Nigeria, it's still small. But what is cheering about the budget that has been signed, the appropriation bill that has not been signed by the president, is the fact that for the first time we are seeing a reasonable amount being allocated to development fund for capital projects. Capital expenditure in that budget is 32.2 trillion naira, which is about 50%, nearly 50% of the budget size. I don't think we've had this size before. But of course, what matters, again, going from if the previous experience is any guide, what is more important is the execution, the implementation. You can see what we have been experiencing since 2023, 2024, multiple year budget implementation, particularly the capital components, which is also why you saw the president extending the implementation of the 2025 capital component, up till the end of June, because it was not significantly implemented in 2025. So that is the aspect we need to deal with. So, but I'm happy that we recognize that there is need to give attention to capital, the capital component of the budget. And I'm also happy about the priorities. The budget is prioritizing security, prioritizing infrastructure. I think the infrastructure component is getting 3.5 trillion, and then education, health, and agriculture. I think these are the priorities of the budget. And I think, going forward, what is of utmost importance and what Nigerians are expected to see is the execution of the budget.
Exactly, Prof. Allow me come in there. Revenue projections, revenues to be generated and all of that. How well do you see it, considering the assumptions also of this spending plan? Crude oil projection, dollar rates and all of that. So what do you make of that revenue aspect of it?
Yes, the revenue side, the FG is projecting a revenue of about 37 trillion. And I don't think the benchmarks were touched. The government is still expecting or still using about $60 per barrel. Yeah. Oil price benchmark, 1.8 million barrels, about that, in terms of crude oil production. Exchange rates of 1,500 naira to the dollar. So I think all of those, in my view, are beginning to appear realistic now. You saw what has just happened. The oil price, has suddenly tanked to about $88 per barrel, but it's still way higher than what we have put out there. So I think that we may end up having, particularly with respect to the oil price, more favorable, variance. Oil price is likely to, stay, higher than the $60 per barrel that we have used, for the, by way of average for the rest of the year. So in terms of revenue projections, I think we may not be completely off the mark, which is why I also want to suggest that whatever additional things we get by way of windfalls, because by and large we are likely to have that, those should be used to reduce the size of the deficit. We have a deficit of over 31 trillion naira, and that of course means that we are also going to borrow as much as that to be able to finance that deficit. And you can see already the weight of the debt that they call it the opportunity cost of the debt service. Debt service in 2026 budget is 15.8 trillion, which is even higher than what has been voted for education, health, the critical sectors, combined.
Yeah.
So the opportunity cost of what we are spending on debt service is huge, and that's the more reason we have to, going forward, find ways to reduce the debt, debt stock. And I think one of the ways by which we can reduce the deficit is to use the surplus we are going to get to, reduce
service
that. And also, I also think we should, if where possible, put more money in agriculture.
All right then. Professor Uwaleke, that's our time. I must thank you so much, President of the Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on the News at 7.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, Precious, a lot of stuff happening in the world of business.
Absolutely. I like that both of them have to do with the pockets of Nigeria.
I tell you, I have a lot of work to do when I leave here.
Absolutely.
Over to you, Precious.
Thank you so much,
All
to
right,
for that insightful interview.